Roxy, we're going to be talking about kids today. So let's go back to our kids' selves. What are 3 words your parents would have used to describe little Roxy?
I think they probably would have said I was a teacher's pet, but I'm going to go with bookish. And so bookish. They always said I was like kind of silly or goofy as a kid. And and affectionate.
Aw.
Yeah, I think I was like a big hugger.
That's really sweet. Those are a lot sweeter than I think what my parents might have said, which is highly verbal.
Oh.
Curious and strong-willed.
Those are good. I mean, you know, strong-willed could... I feel like strong-willed girls might get called other things when they're teenagers, like bossy or know-it-all.
Yep.
Which I think we both maybe got called.
Yeah. But, okay, so my parents have both said, like, you talked all the time when you were a kid. But this, as well as curiosity and being strong-willed, are exactly what make for a good podcaster. So these qualities have benefited me in my adult life.
I mean, if you're going to be gabbing anyway, might as well get paid for it.
That big religion news service check. From Religion News Service. But thank you, Religion News Service. For an RNS, this is Saved by the City, a podcast from 2 Christian women gabbing about all the hot cultural trends and conversations. I'm Katelyn Beatty.
And I'm Roxy Stone.
So in our episode with Tiffany Bloom at the end of last year, the roasts and toasts of 2024, I said something about Chapel Roan that I have to take back now, that I feel deeply remorseful over.
You've come around on her.
I have, yeah.
Okay. I like to hear this.
I've had the song Pink Pony Club. Do you know this song?
Of course. Yes.
That was like a mom question. Like, have you heard of this Taylor Swift? I have had the song Pink Pony Club stuck in my head for like 2 months. It's such a bop. It's so catchy.
Yes, a true earworm, for sure.
It is an earworm.
Not the RFK Jr. kind of earworm. The good kind.
I heard someone sing it at karaoke a couple weeks ago, and it was fantastic. But this was right as Chapel Roan was in the news for something she had said on a podcast called Call Her Daddy. There's Saved by the City, there's Call Her Daddy. And boy, was her comment a lightning rod. Let's hear the clip.
All of my friends who have kids are in hell. I actually don't know anyone who's like happy and has children at this age. Anyone who has like light in their eyes, anyone who has slept.
Okay, so this is like mommy wars for the Gen Z set.
And so if you had to guess, what do you think the backlash was to this?
I'm sure JD Vance had thoughts. I don't know if he listens to Call Her Daddy, but yes. No, but I feel like that set of like the sort of pro-natalist Theo bros, even some of like the Elon Musk, like there's sort of this whole world, right, that is very like, we need to have more kids. And there's different like threads of that.
Right.
And one of them is very much conservative Christian, like the anti-childless cat ladies crowd.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure they had thoughts.
Yes. And also moms, probably, you know, right-leaning or right of center, felt like her saying this is kind of denigrating motherhood. Like, to describe parents as being in hell, they're probably concerned that Chapel Roan is like discouraging people from having kids, even though that's not what she said. She's just describing friends who are parents, but kind of this, no, the narrative around motherhood needs to be that it is the most beautiful and fulfilling thing that a person can choose to do. And like any other narrative out there is like anti-child. So one conservative activist group said that this comment contributed to a growing anti-child sentiment in society. There's a cultural expectation that children should be rarely seen in public, which I'm like, have you spent any time in public recently? I always see kids in public. This group went on to say that motherhood is made to appear as a life of misery filled with exhaustion and ungrateful children, akin to enslavement. And parents of young children are so rarely treated with kindness. Now, this is obviously like an overreaction.
Some hyperbole.
Perhaps. But this group might also say that Chapel Roan was being hyperbolic. Like to say that her parent friends are in hell. Like, it's probably not true.
Like not the literal hell.
No. Maybe they're in parenting purgatory.
So in this episode, we're going to interrogate all of this. Are we actually seeing a growing anti-child sentiment in society? Is it really true that motherhood is seen as miserable? Are parents of children rarely treated with kindness, as this group says?
You sound dubious.
I'm just asking questions, Caitlin.
Are we actually seeing our parents of children? Yeah. We're going to get into whether our culture is actually becoming more anti-kids. This is the sentiment that this group and other people responding to Chapel Roan's comment are claiming. But to start the convo and to get to the facts on the ground, instead of just like what's happening on the internet, I think it's time for a data dump. We haven't done one this season.
Dump being an appropriate word here because kids take a lot of them.
It's amazing how much poop is like a core part of your life, caring for a young child.
Yeah, I think the baby stage, like there's a lot of body excrements that bodily fluids that must be dealt with.
When you say body excrements,
I think that was the wrong word. I think I meant excretions, fluids.
Excrements. Yes. As an aside, I was helping to watch my youngest nephew several months ago, and my parents were leaving. So it was just me and him at home.
A baby.
Yes, the baby, not the 5-year-old. And he had just a like insane diaper filled with the aforementioned excrement. And as I was like removing it and trying to do it quickly because he was crying, he started peeing.
Oh, yeah.
like shooting up while there was, it was just this whole, I was like laughing and screaming. It was a big event in our family's life.
Yeah. I was at a friend's baby shower not too long ago. It was like a girls' weekend kind of thing. But we also had like baby shower moment. And I was introduced to a thing. I don't know what the name of it is. Parents will know. But you know how there's like the snot suckers that you get snot out of babies?
Yeah, they're little contraptions with like a little ball at the end.
That's the one I'd seen, but apparently there's also one where you can suck on the other end to suck the snot out, like a straw. And there's apparently a thing that stops the snot from being sucked into your mouth.
I mean, that's the first question, right?
Yes.
Like, how in the world do you stop your child's snot from getting into your mouth? And the manufacturers, I'm sure,
they thought about
assure
it.
you.
Yeah. They put a barrier in place. However, I think I would have still a mental barrier to get over before sucking that snot out. This one friend said it works way better than the one with the little sucky ball.
I have also heard this. You know, we should get some kind of ad from this company. We're clearly their target demographic.
All right. Let's dump some data.
Without much further ado,
you know, you're almost qualified to be a dad with that joke.
It's true.
First stat. As we've mentioned on this podcast in the past, it is true that fewer Americans are having kids. According to Pew Research, in 2023, the number of childless adults younger than 50 who say they are unlikely to ever have children rose 10 percentage points over 5 years. So that went from 37% in 2018 to 47% in 2023. So if you're younger than 50 and you don't already have kids, almost half of those folks say they never will.
And among that set, 57% say a major reason they're unlikely to have kids is that they just don't want to. So you might say, like, well, these people are just waiting too long to, like, get married and settle down, or they have financial concerns. But Pew found that 57% said, I just don't want to have kids.
That's surprising.
Even still, a majority of Americans are biological parents. In 2021, about 57% of all American women ages 15 to 49 have had at least one child, and about 60% of men ages 15 to 49 are fathers.
Rates of childbirth are growing, actually, especially among older women. More women ages 35 and older are having children. From 1990 to 2023, the fertility rate for women ages 35 to 39 increased 71%, and for women ages 40 to 44 increased 127%.
I've heard that 40 is the new 30, just anecdotally.
God's honest truth.
Yet, data do bear out Chapel Roan's comment, at least in part. For the last few decades, several studies have found that, in general, people without kids are happier than people with kids in developed countries, and the happiness gap between parents and non-parents is the greatest in the United States.
Got some thoughts on that. All right. Our next data point sort of speaks into that and the fact of how expensive it is to have children in America and how little sort of support there is. We are seeing a rise in DINKs, or dual income, no kid couples. Or maybe they're just really good at social media. They're very visible. While DINKs compose only 5% of the U.S. population, they out-earn their neighbors. 61% of DINKs have a household income of over $100,000 compared to 41% of all Americans. So you save money if you don't have kids.
That's the big reveal, you guys. Children are expensive. So what I take from this data set kind of compiled together is this claim that there's this overarching anti-child sentiment in the United States just isn't true. I think in part because a majority of Americans do have kids.
Yeah.
Childbirth rates might be down, like, compared with previous decades in the West, but a majority of Americans are parents. It's not like the number of people who don't have kids are even close to outnumbering those with kids.
Right.
So maybe the question is, okay, it's not a numerical reality, but is there some kind of shifting sentiment that are making people more open to talking about not wanting kids, not liking kids, or just how difficult it is to have kids?
Well, I do think people are having fewer kids, right? That's one of the reasons it's down. Like, maybe most Americans are still having kids, but they're having fewer kids. And I think some of that is, well, there's all kinds of reasons for that, economic reasons in particular, but also, like, you know, people aren't having kids to, like, operate the family business or the farm anymore. And that's real.
The utilitarian purpose of kids has been replaced by a more emotional or kind of affection-oriented reason for having kids.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that people in history did not love their kids, but I think some of that is there. Child mortality rates are way down. And I also think that people just spend more money per child than they used to. So a per child expense is higher. I feel like this started out as a good thing. Like, I think people, especially moms, maybe in, like, the blogging era or something, started to be more honest about the challenges of motherhood and to be more publicly transparent or authentic about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was, like, a good impulse. And, like, maybe now the pendulum has swung too far and all we hear about is, like, the misery of motherhood or something. But I feel like maybe it started out in a good place.
Well, say more about why you think that was a good impulse. Like, why was it good that more women were talking about feeling unhappy with different aspects of being a mom?
was that movie? I'm trying to think what that movie was. It had Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, but it wasn't Titanic. It was
Titanic.
The other one. It was the other one.
It's called Revolutionary Road.
Yes. Right. I think that reality is why it's better that we're talking about it. Like, I think there were a lot of women for a long time who were quietly depressed and maybe quietly hating their lives or quietly becoming alcoholics or like all of these like ways that there was like not a lot of recognition of the stress of motherhood or the toll that it takes on women or the emotional load. And then we were also like, more women are also like in the workforce now. And so there's these expectations that you're both mother and
a CEO,
right? A CEO, a girl boss. And so I think there was like okay, let's be honest. My living room isn't always picture perfect. And these things are really hard. Let's talk about it as women. Let's support each other.
Yeah. Or even like I had severe postpartum depression after my child was born. I went from seeing tons of people at work or in my community to feeling very isolated at home, caring for young children. I experienced new financial insecurity or anxiety. Like, I think the mental health aspects of being a parent, maybe especially in a more traditional setup where like the mom is primarily at home and primarily responsible for caring for young children. I think it's good that more women are talking about that because it helps other women to feel less isolated in their own experience. Because what's even worse than feeling like depressed after your child is born is feeling like, but I shouldn't be depressed. I should only be ecstatic and over the moon and having these amazing, precious moments with my newborn, when in fact I feel like I don't always feel connected to them, or I'm not getting sleep. So of course my mental health is taking a nosedive. I think it's good to help remove some of the stigma for women who might be experiencing becoming a parent as actually really hard, lonely, or having significant mental health costs.
Yes. And now I do worry. I have experienced a pendulum swing that is too far in some ways. Like now I feel like I so rarely hear about the joys of motherhood and parenting. And maybe this is just the algorithm feeding me something, but I feel like what I like see so often is the sort of like tiredness, the stress, the articles about how much of the emotional load the wives and mothers still bear, and how like the expectation of like all of this stuff at work, and then still the expectation of all of this stuff at home and kids drop-offs and all the rest. And I think it's like that's the message that is more prominent in some ways, or more front and center than the joys of parenting or mothering.
Yeah, it could leave someone asking like, well, why have kids?
Yeah.
Like if it's really this hard and challenging and exhausting, should people have kids? I don't know. I mean, of course, people will continue to have children regardless of whether it makes them happy or not. But I wonder if a lot of women feel like if I talk about the joys of motherhood, am I going to make other women feel bad or like play into an unhelpful narrative? And I don't want to do that. So I'll just downplay my own happiness in this.
I don't know. Did you see the Night Bish monologue?
Yes. A movie that came out last year starring Amy Adams as the mother of young children, and she turns into a wolf.
I can't say I watched it. I actually thought it was a series. Was it just a movie?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there was like a trailer, and she's in the supermarket with her toddler, and she runs into someone she used to know from work or something, and this woman says like, is it so amazing to get to stay home with your baby? And then Amy Adams like drops this monologue.
That's a good question, you know, but it's complicated though, because I mean, I would love to feel content, but instead I feel like I'm just stuck inside of a prison of my own creation where I torment myself until I'm left binge eating Fig Newtons at midnight to keep from crying. And I feel like societal norms and gender expectations and just plain old biology have forced me to become this person that I don't recognize, and I'm just angry all the time, like all the time. And I would love to direct some of my own artwork towards a critique of the modern day systems that articulate this, but my brain just doesn't function the way that it did before I had the baby, and I'm dumb now. And I am deeply afraid that I am never going to be smart or happy or thin ever again.
I feel like that's a very like front and center message right now.
Mm-hmm.
That you will never be the same again once you have a baby, which I guess is true.
And like in a bad way. You will lose something essential or fundamental about, fundamentally good about like who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we can draw a causal link between women talking more openly about the challenges of having and raising kids and the growing number of people who are saying they don't want kids. Like that would be hard to trace. I don't think that Knight Bish convinced like millions of women to not have kids.
Well,
it would be difficult to trace like causally. Here's my hot take. You can push back. In my perspective, it does seem like people who do not want children feel more comfortable saying that openly. And by openly, I do mean on social media. Like, so we're talking about a discourse that I've primarily observed on social media. But it does seem like there are more people saying, I don't want kids. I never want kids. And I don't like kids. Like, they're messy, smelly, inconvenient, rude. They take over everything. They've made my friends miserable. Like, my friends who have had kids seem like they're in hell. I don't like kids. And I find that to be an odd statement that people feel comfortable saying out loud.
Which part? The part that they don't want kids, or the part that they don't like kids? Or the part where they like have these specific complaints about kids?
I guess that people saying, I don't want kids, it seems like probably more people are just comfortable saying that out loud, whereas perhaps in generations past, they wouldn't have felt like it was socially acceptable to say that.
Yeah, it probably felt like almost revolutionary. Yeah. Like you were really pretty rebellious or something to say you didn't want kids.
But the additional layer of people explicitly saying, I don't like kids as kids, feels like there's also new openness to saying that. And that makes me uncomfortable. It's hard for me to gauge how much of a hot take this is, because I'm not saying that you have to want kids. I'm not saying anybody has to want kids.
But you are saying you should like kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the way that you should like all groups of people as people.
I don't know if it's a hot take or not. I think it's probably a good take, a Christian take. I think it was not too long ago that people would have said it's not okay to not want kids. I think I'm okay. I'm good that we've moved on from that. You know, like I think probably like Pope Francis would disagree with me, and most Catholic theologians and probably a lot of Protestant ones too, although fewer of them, would probably say like, if you are married, you should want to have children. Like that should be part of like a fundamental potential of every marriage that should be pursued.
Right.
So I don't think we're that far past the point where people would say that's not an okay stance. And I'm not there. I would not say that. Like, I think if you have made the decision to not want children, you and your spouse have agreed on that if you're married, I think that's fine. I think that's good. Like, I think, again, sort of to the conversation earlier, like maybe you've made an honest assessment of what it is to have children, and you've said that's not for me.
Yeah. I'm not convinced everybody should become a parent, right? For all sorts of reasons.
Yeah. And I think there are really good things to do in the world that you can do if you're not a parent that you couldn't do if you were a parent, just because of the demands of parenting. And
the way that our society is set up to with such a lack of social support for working parents.
Uh-huh.
Like, I don't fault anybody for saying, I love my job. It is inflexible. There's no paid leave, or there's like 6 weeks paid leave that I have to cobble together from vacation days and sick leave. It's not worth it to me. That's a perfectly fine choice for someone to make about their own family life and family and career, to say like, kids are not for me because I have other priorities.
I definitely don't think it should follow to say I don't like kids.
Yeah.
Like, I think to say I don't want kids, for me personally, is a fine thing to say, a good thing to say if that's the decision that you've made. I think you probably should do some real like soul searching if you've decided that you don't like a whole people group, for sure.
Yeah, I think the closest point of comparison, and I'm not coming up with this is just following the discourse. It might be to say I don't like kids might be akin to saying I don't like old people. Which, like,
I don't like them young and I don't like them old.
And I don't like them. I don't know. I mean, this could go in like, you know, some really bad places. Like, it's fine if you are like, I don't want to actively pursue spending time with old people. But to say I don't like old people is patently ageist. Mm-hmm. And I think we need some kind of word that captures a similar sentiment toward kids. Like, I don't like kids. I don't know if it's anti-kids, but to write off a whole subset of people, I think we should avoid that. This conversation often will then turn into whether it's okay for certain events or spaces to be designated no kids. This often comes up with weddings, and, you know, certain couples decide this is an adults only celebration, and others are like, no, bring your kids, you know, and people have different metrics for making that decision. Is saying our wedding is for adults only, is that anti-kids?
I don't know. I've had changing thoughts on this over the years. There was definitely a time when I would have said, it's church. A wedding is at church, so you should be able to bring your kids, and anything that's related to that should be able to be intergenerational, you know, and that an intergenerational wedding is a beautiful wedding and more communal and all of those things. I loved going to weddings as a kid. So, and then I went and got married, and we did have an adults only wedding. So, we had a few kids. We did have, we had 2 flower girls. One was my goddaughter, but we really like wrestled with this language, and what to say and how to say it, and what lines to draw on this.
Yeah.
What we ran into for us was like a capacity issue in the reception. So, you know, we just could only invite half the guests if we said everybody could bring their kids. And that was really hard. Yeah. That would have meant cutting like a lot of our closest friends. But we tried to make it so that if your kids were under 2 and you needed to bring them, you could. If they were over 2, we asked that you didn't bring them, said something about like childcare or whatever, but to please call us. That would keep you from attending the wedding or something. I don't remember. And I don't think everyone was happy about it. I think we had upset people, somewhat upset family members, I think. I don't know. I just heard rumors of it. I don't know if it was true or not. But for the most part, people seemed fine with that. And I feel like it's more and more common. And I do think there's, you know, we had alcohol at our wedding. We had dancing. It was a formal black tie affair.
Yeah.
Like,
it was an adult.
I don't know. That doesn't seem inappropriate to say no kids. But I also like think that weddings are great when they're intergenerational. So I don't know. I'll probably get like hate mail about this. I hope not.
No. I mean, one response to that would be like, and even this I'd want to nuance a little bit, but, you know, one response would be like, your wedding is yours to decide how you want to do it. And you are the primary reason why people are gathering. I know you don't want to say like, it's just about us. Like, you do want to acknowledge that it is also about a whole community coming together to witness something and to celebrate together. But children can be very disruptive. And primarily a wedding is not a day or an event for children. It is not designed around them. And just knowing that whatever decisions you make about your wedding, people are not everybody's going to be 100% happy. It's not going to be exactly how everybody there would have done it. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Definitely.
It is happening. I can't speak to the frequency on Twitter, like there are definitely these takes that go viral, and the same is true on Reddit. Like, I will say as an aside, Reddit is a much more helpful and interesting forum. And I feel like it's taken some of the Twitter X, what that used to be.
I think Reddit weirdly is both the past and the future.
It's profound. Yes, there are people who are saying this.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a couple of people say, I don't like being around kids.
Yeah,
That's
I think I know that. Also, there are some people who are not very good at being around kids. So I don't know if they just need more practice or if we should keep them away from kids. I'm not sure.
Also, I have this whole high elevated take about like people should like kids. But there are times when I am in a public place where someone else's kids are being very disruptive or running around or getting in the way. And I do feel frustrated. Like, ugh, why are they here? Or like, get your kids under control. Like, I don't say that.
You have a baby in a bar?
No, well, that's a separate issue. It's more just, I encountered it more often in the Wheaton suburbs, where certain spaces almost felt like overrun by young kids. And it was just kind of a cultural norm that like, hey, there are a lot of young families here, and this is just how it is. I felt more frustrated toward the parents for not helping their kids be respectful of other people than like the kids themselves. So, but I get not wanting to be around kids all the time. I like specific kids in my life, but not like I love all children. That's not true. There are specific kids I don't like, and I'm going to name them right here. I'm just kidding.
I agree. And I love kids, and I am not always ready to be around kids. It takes a particular energy. And like when I'm around some of my closest friends who have kids, like it's a different experience when the kids are there versus when they're not there. Like the kind of conversations that we could have, how much attention I get from my friends and how divided it is, like all of that. I know I want the attention and the kids keep taking it.
I just heard this on Wait, Don't Tell Me, the NPR news show, where apparently more parents are getting together without their kids to have tantrums together.
Oh, that's amazing.
Where they're like, I have to be the adult and have it like emotionally put together when I'm with my kids, and I just want a space where I can like let loose in the way my kids apparently feel free to do. Something to think about.
Also, what is a podcast if not a tantrum? But this is a thing that when people say I don't like kids or I don't like old people, if we have people saying that also, or
people definitely say that. They definitely are like, old people are weird and gross and I will never go into a nursing home again. Like definitely.
Right. Those are people who need help. Those are people who are dependent. No, I mean the children are and the older people. Those are people.
I thought you were saying
also probably
those people who need psychological evaluation.
No, I feel like there is a selfishness to that. There is a like I don't want to have to take care of other people. I don't want to be inconvenienced by dependent people. Or on the other end of the spectrum, I don't want to be reminded of my mortality, which I think is also a reason people avoid old people.
I think some people avoid kids because it reminds them that they had a very hard childhood. Like, I think for some people, being a kid was so miserable because of, like, they had really bad parents or family trauma, or like they look back on their childhood and it's very unhappy. And so being around kids reminds them of that experience, and they don't want that.
Oh, that's tragic.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes being around children reminds me that I'm old, and I don't love that. But
you're not old.
Older.
Yes, you are older than you were when you were 23.
Or 7.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, you're the future. I used to be the future. Now I'm just the present. Anyway.
We're going to get even more philosophical, but first we should probably stop and thank our sponsors for letting us go here.
Mm-hmm. Religion News Service is an independent, award-winning source of global reporting on religion, spirituality, culture, and ethics.
For thoughtful commentary on hot-button issues such as Christian Zionism, the growing Maha movement, and even wrestling churches of England, which I definitely just learned about 2 hours ago, visit religionnews.com.
We have some new fan mail. Carrie Orteza wrote in to say that SBTC has been a beacon of good sense in these turbulent times. She says, I've experienced my own evangelical betrayal in the last few years, and as I've dissected that experience, it's been so comforting to listen to both of your thoughts and experiences.
Thanks, Carrie. Also, we are definitely open to your suggestion that we talk about bad dating advice we've gotten in the church. Buckle up. We'd love to hear your feedback and ideas for future guests and topics. So drop us a review wherever you listen, or shoot us an email at sbtcpodcast@religionnews.com.
I'm Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch. This week on The State of Belief, author, scholar, minister, educator, and public intellectual, the Reverend Dr. Michael Eric Dyson.
So white Christian nationalism makes one thing clear that we should not be mistaken about. The real religion is whiteness, not Christianity.
The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet. Distributed by Religion News Service Podcasts and available on your favorite podcast app.
Something that you were getting at a minute ago, that young people, old people, like children, the elderly, one of the reasons that a lot of us have a hard time loving these groups of people or being around them is because they need help, that they are considered inconvenient or just requiring a lot of energy. I mean, of course, I love being around my nephews. And then as soon as I'm done being around them, I feel exhausted and kind of relieved that I have 5 minutes to think in like an adult thought. So I can see how, like, culturally we're kind of predisposed to devalue people who just require a lot of us, who are dependent in a really specific way. And that's all the more why Christian communities are called to esteem children, to esteem old people. Like the people who the world says are like inconvenient and a waste of time are in fact the people who we are most called to cherish. And yeah, I mean, in church yesterday morning, this kid was like running around the altar at communion time. I was like, where are his parents? But I'm like, but no, Katelyn, if you can't be patient with kids in this space, then do you really like kids or love kids as much as you pride yourself on doing so? Like, this space of all spaces, I think, should be pro-child.
Yeah. I think there's a reason that Jesus gives a special place in his order of love to like children, you know? And some of that is because I think there's a beauty in being dependent, and there's a beauty in being innocent as children are, and to not being sort of restricted by the rules of society and still sort of free of that. And so I think that church also, in addition to being like a place that should be welcoming of children. I see church as a place in part where we learn from children, and that's why we include them and why we involve them, why we celebrate children at churches, or why we should.
That it's not just us caring for kids, but kids actually teach us something about the reality of God and God's kingdom.
And I think that if you don't have kids by choice or because you can't, I think church offers a beautiful time to be able to interact with them. Or if your kids are already grown, I think that's part of what church is it's a special place in the community where you can be around all the generations and to have that kind of community. It's one of the things that church can be that's different from the rest of the world now.
Yeah.
You know, there were other times in history where that wasn't the special thing the church did because everywhere you went, kids were. But
yeah,
our workplaces are far from our homes. We send our kids to daycare and to school. And, you know, we have a society that mostly demands of parents to do all of these jobs and all of the stuff outside of the home and away from their kids. And so we don't interact with kids a lot, and our world isn't really ordered around kids in a lot of ways. And so I think church now is and can be a place that stands out in that way, where if where you can see families together and you can interact with kids and you can have an intergenerational moment in your week.
I really liked this quote from the Lutheran theologian Marcia Bunge. She writes, "All children, whether biological or adopted, are gifts to us. They are God's gifts not only to their parents, but also to the community, for they will grow up to be not only sons and daughters, but also husbands, wives, friends, neighbors, and citizens." And I just liked that it reminded us that like children are people. Mm-hmm. That's something we can all agree on.
Saved by the City is a religion news service production. The producer is Jay Woodward and the consulting editor is Paul O'Donnell. Julia Wyndham is our editor.
Chaz Rousseau put together our look and Martin Fowler wrote our theme music.
We are Roxy Stone
and Caitlin Beatty. Thanks for listening.